for sitting and talking with me today. I want to say congratulations on raising all that money for the Bloom Virtual Summit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. So, the Bloom Virtual Summit was 4 days of workshops, performances, networking, and just like a bunch of fun virtual events. And it was to raise funds for our annual show in full color, which features women of color sharing their stories. So we actually raised $2,500, like $1,000 over our original goal.
Okay, that's good. Actually, Summer, can you actually turn it down a little?
Yeah, let's
That's-
turn it off. Fine.
all
Yeah, that's
right.
how I was like, I think it's too loud. Okay.
Before, I don't know why it wasn't. But all right. Okay. So, Virtual Summit Bloom. Like, what exactly is Bloom? Well, I know In Full Color is the organization, but what is Bloom? Why don't you break that down?
Yeah, so Bloom is our annual fundraiser, and it's just a fun way for women to connect and kind of share wisdom with each other while raising money for In Full Color.
Okay, and In Full Color, the organization. When was that founded?
So we started producing in 2015. We had our first show, and we partnered with an organization called Art House Productions. And we did a couple seasons with them, and then we incorporated as our own company in 2017.
Okay, and you founded In Full Color, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, I want to take it back because I know you're extremely talented. You're a writer, actor, I believe a singer, playwright, and a director. Clearly a jack of all trades. So let's take it back a little. When did you get into the arts?
I've always kind of been into the arts. I was an only child, so it's like I didn't really have, a lot to do. So I would read a lot, and then I started wanting to write a lot as well, and just like telling stories. I mean, even before I learned how to read and write when I was very young. I was maybe like 2 or 3, but I didn't write fast enough to keep up with my own storytelling. So I have like cassette tapes, and I would like record stories onto cassette when I was like 7 years old. So it's kind of been writing since then. And then writing is really, I think, the foundation of what I do and my relationship with language. And then I just kind of expanded, as an artist, as an actor, as a director, and then I've been singing all my life too.
Okay, how many languages do you speak?
I speak 3, and I'm trying to learn Portuguese right now. But I
Okay.
speak English, Ilongo. It's a Filipino dialect. It's a mix of it has like Malayo-Indonesian roots and a lot of Spanish loanwords, and then I speak Spanish.
Okay, and what is your ethnic background?
So I'm Filipino. I am also Spanish, and I'm also Chinese, but I don't speak any Chinese. I'm kind of
Okay.
sad about that.
All right, so in regards to your writing and you being attracted to the arts, did your parents play any role in that? Were they themselves like, involved in the arts?
So my mom was very artistic. She was a singer. She also played the piano and the organ. She could also draw. She could kind of do everything. She was a dancer. She did a lot of folk dancing. So she was a very artistic person. So I think, some of that rubbed off on me. But she was interesting because she was an artist in the sense of being skilled and being talented, but not in like her spirit and her creativity and her like relationship with the arts in general. I think was a little limited. Whereas my dad is like really interested in the arts and like consuming it, and he loves, movies and music, and he was a big influence in my life musically as far as like what he listened to all the time.
Okay. So I was going through some of your writing on your blog. Um, Actually, I read all the short stories.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't update it anymore, do you?
I don't, but I should probably get back to it. But now you have the book too, right? And a
Yeah,
lot of the
yeah.
stories are in there.
I actually shared the book with a couple friends. My one friend, she got back to me. She's in love with it. She really likes it. So it's really good work. So you wrote a short story, Fit. No, first before that, do you consider yourself like a political person?
I think when I wrote those short stories, I was probably not, and I think now I am.
And what ushered in that change? Like what made you become, I don't want to say aware, but interested in social justice causes?
Um, so I think I was always like I was like always pro gay, pro brown, all those things. But not really active in politics because I think I was focused on making art for art and just being young and social and like emotional relationships and things like that. And then I think just getting older and getting more perspective, becoming more educated and doing a lot of work, especially with women of color and just being exposed to more of, the issues that marginalized groups face, I think was really what made me more passionate about it. Like I grew up in Jersey City, and we're one of the most diverse cities in the world, probably. Um, Us and San Francisco are the most diverse cities in the U.S. So I always grew up around people of different backgrounds, and always like wanted to advocate for them. But being like working up close with different women and hearing stuff that's from their soul, or hearing about certain political issues, it's just like when it's in front of you, it's like there's no question to me that it's important.
Now, I know you're one thing I admire about anybody when they have what their personal beliefs and their political beliefs, and they have a platform where they let the world know, hey, this is what I believe. We live in a pretty messed up world. People cut you down, criticize you for your beliefs, but I always look up to people who are with no fear are willing to say what they believe. So you're pretty vocal in your stances. Have you lost any friends or family due to even Black Lives Matter? I know a lot of people, the movement, a lot of family, probably don't agree with the stance, or older generations probably think it's too much. So did you lose any friends because of this, or any butt heads with any family members?
So unfortunately, my family is very conservative, especially my mother's family. So my mother was a pastor's kid, and the whole family was like involved in the church, and they're Baptist and extremely conservative. I don't know, but I know if like I don't know everybody, but I know that some of them voted for Trump. Just like really not cool with that. I definitely defriended a lot of the family members I had on Facebook, but I didn't really add them to begin with. It was more like my mother pressured me to. My mother is a negative force in my life, and she was very abusive, so I no longer talk to her. And I know she had some political views for sure that I disagree with. So with family, like for sure, like for me, I have some family members that I have a wonderful relationship with, that I'm really close to. But for the most part, like the vast majority of my family, I don't share political views with and don't really have a connection to.
Okay.
Friends, my chosen family, as some people would say, it's been a lot better because I just, I don't hang out with racists, so I'm not
Yeah.
like, but of course, there are some people that I know from work or from the art scene or from just associating or just, you didn't realize because you'd never spoken about politics that, oh my God, this person's racist or homophobic or whatever it is. So once in a while that has happened, and, we'll trade words. I try to be, I'm not the kind of person who will like yell at someone online, and I also don't really try to use reason or logic because I think that hate is illogical. So if you're coming from a stance of being racist or homophobic or sexist, reason and logic is not going to change your mind. You've already taken a very illogical stance. It doesn't make any sense to be hateful towards anyone. Um, so really I use more rhetoric,
Hmm.
because I'm a writer. And like, I will cite logic or facts as needed, but I'm also aware that like ultimately that's not going to sway a lot of people. So I'll engage a little bit, and I try to come from a place that's compassionate, or compassionate in the sense where I don't want to like necessarily throw a whole person in the garbage. Maybe this person will realize like, oh my gosh, I'm being, terrible for being homophobic, and change their ways. Um, but I'm also not going to spend all my time on it. So,
I know. Okay, there's a lot that I want to unpack there. Um, okay, first going back to your mother, you said that she was a negative force in your life. So I was on the Info Color YouTube channel, and I saw a skit that you did with your friend. I forget the exact name of it, and I remember watching it. And I was like, this feels. Well, you're a good actor, but actress, but I'm saying it felt. I'm like, this feels too real. Like you were drawn on a real experience. So that's kind of crazy how you just mentioned that. So how much of your work, especially short stories with a common theme is love and heartbreak, do you draw on a lot of real life experience from those around you, or?
I think quite a lot. I think most writers do. Even when you're writing something that's totally fictional, definitely, emotions or relationships tend to be informed by your experience of those things. Sometimes I'll borrow interesting details from real life, but also a lot of times I'll make the details up, take some artistic liberty. So the scene you were talking about was a scene I did with my friend Rachel Handler, and we called it mommy issues, but it doesn't have
Yes,
like a
yes, yes,
full
yes.
name. Yeah. So in that skit, my character, so I wrote the skit, and I wrote it for myself and for Rachel specifically. So yeah, like she has a prosthetic leg, which I think you can see in the video. So her character is a dancer who lost her leg at some point. And then my character is someone who's a really bad relationship with their mother, who was a drug addict and all of these things. And then she's like in the hospital. And Rachel's character is trying to convince me to go see my mother, in case she dies or whatever.
Hmm.
So like the details aren't true as far as my mom's not a drug addict, and she wasn't like, I don't have any other siblings. I don't think my mom has diabetes. I don't know. So, but the relationship is very real. Like that feeling of this was a person who is abusive and really negative, and like had so many chances already to make it right. Um, and just that feeling, I wrote that scene in frustration because everyone has a mother, everyone has an opinion on my relationship with my mother, and I understand, and I'm like, well, that's your relationship with your mother. And yeah, I'm not saying how I've chosen to deal with it is perfect, but it's the decision I've made for myself considering my specific circumstances.
Exactly. No, no, I
Yeah.
can relate. I definitely can relate to that. Is your mother still around?
She is. She is across the world in the Philippines.
Oh, okay. She went back
Yeah.
to the Philippines. Okay. So, do you think your, how do I say, your relationship with your mother, no matter how negative it was, do you think that kind of pushed you on the path that you are on now? For some of the things that you champion, some of the causes you champion and such?
So basically, she was abusive in multiple ways, but she was also chronically ill. And I was an only child. My parents were divorced, and so it was just me and her. And so I was taking care of her in a lot of ways. Like she wasn't cooking and cleaning and stuff like that, and she wasn't working. She wasn't doing anything. And I was working. I had to provide food. I had to do all of these things. I did the groceries. I was talking to the landlords at 12. I was doing all this stuff, and I grew up really quick. And we were very poor, and we just had like a lot of things in life were really difficult from the beginning. And so I just have a lot of like resilience, a lot of grit. I know how to take care of other people, and I can be really dutiful. Like I'm good in an emergency. I'm a person who's good in an emergency. Like I'll be very like focused and like solution oriented, and all of that, helps me in my daily life. It helps me in being an artist, being an advocate, being an arts administrator, being a teaching artist. Um, but those, positive skills were kind of forged in quite a fire. It was very difficult. So I recognize that there are great things that came out of it in a sense, and I wouldn't be who I am today necessarily if it weren't for those experiences, but they were certainly still negative.
Mm-hmm. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Getting the video.
No worries.
Okay. All right. So, just to backtrack a little bit, I'm still unpacking. We were talking about how your political views or stances on certain issues, created a divide amongst family or friends, which is really common. How tolerant would you say you are? If somebody, you say you don't befriend racists. If somebody is a racist, is that somebody you're willing to have a conversation to try to show them the errors of their train of thought? Not really trying to convert them, but just trying to in a different way. 'Cause I feel like a lot of times we tear each other down. Some circumstances, necessarily so. But how tolerant of you are of conflicting ideals or total polar opposite of what you believe in?
So I think I think there's a spectrum. So I'm really more interested in talking to people who are, not that racist. People who are maybe casually racist, or people who are, I'm not going to
Casually racist.
You know what I mean? Though, like, I'm not going to convince like a Ku Klux Klan member or a neo-Nazi to leave Nazism. It's possible, but I'm not going to spend all my time doing that. I would rather work on the person who thinks, I don't know, that all Jews are greedy and convince them that that's not true. It's a lot easier to do that, and just when you're an advocate, it's like you have to stand up for multiple groups and you have to be passionate and thorough, but you also have to manage your time and have that self-care to be like, I'm not going to go down every road arguing with every person. So, like, if I know somebody, like, so I actually, have a lot of experience from In Full Color doing tours. We'll perform in public. We'll go to schools. We'll go to different places, markets, things like that. And people are it's not always a space that is already carved out for us. Sometimes it's like, here's a performance celebrating Black History Month and In Full Color's here. Like, we're probably not going to run into a lot of racists there unless they're specifically there to, protest Black History Month because they're super racist. But in general, it'll be a good crowd. But if it's something just like, I don't know, artists from the tri-state area, like people went for some other reason. That's usually where we'll run into people who are a little more like, what's this? And they'll, sometimes come up and they'll sometimes challenge, and I'll just, really try to handle it. I try not to fight them. I try to see them where they are and then try to show them the truth, if that makes sense. Like, and try to do it in a way where they feel like I'm having a conversation with them rather than arguing with them. And then, maybe it'll activate something and explore something. Like, I really think that, like, my activism, a lot of it, like, I will say things straight out, like, political statements. And I do all the time on social media, I'm sure you've seen. But I think our most effective work is through our art, because I've said this before, art creates empathy and empathy creates change, right? So when you hear someone's story about how racism has affected them, it's a lot harder when you're hearing a human recount their experience to discount what they're saying versus, if I walk in and say, blacks are disproportionately made victims of violence by the police. Like, if I say I'm debating you and I'm like trying to do facts and all of this stuff, it's a lot easier for you to be like, no, that's not true, or I don't think, or whatever it is. But when someone comes in and they're sharing a story of this, hey, this is how my son was shot by the police, or this is my encounter when I was arrested, or and they're telling you the story, it's a hell of a lot harder to be like, no, your life experience is totally invalid.
And also, I feel like it's human nature to brush things off unless it's directly affecting your life. Unless you're on the receiving end or somebody you care about was on the receiving end. Have you ever been on the receiving end of racism? Have you ever been in that situation?
No, I'm the one brown woman in the world who's never been discriminated against. No,
No, you never know.
that's true. Well, yes, I have been, I've experienced racism, but I'm pretty privileged as a person of color. So that doesn't manifest in violence. It usually doesn't manifest in the worst things people of color experience. Like I'm Asian. Like the most common hardships for Asian people, Asian women, is being sexualized and people thinking they're smart. Like this is like I have a lot of privilege. It's fine. Or even when people see me as Hispanic, they might treat me differently, but I haven't personally received like anything really egregious on that end. Um,
Well,
yeah.
to go back to what you're saying, how you commented, like, because to be honest, you see me. I think I'm in the same. I've never really experienced anything too, crazy. And if I was around somebody who had these kind of thoughts, they probably kept it to themselves. But I actually think that's my problem, with media. Um, and sometimes their portrayal of minorities is when you walk out the door, somebody's throwing stones at you, or listen. Let's get this straight. Everybody's experience is different. Yeah, you're from Jersey City. I live over here in Upper Jersey, New Milford. Our experience is not going to be the same as somebody in Chicago.
Hmm.
So I think that's my problem with media, which leads me to would you consider yourself a liberal?
Yeah.
And do you believe there's anything as being too liberal?
Yeah, I think so.
And do you think that we're seeing any of that now?
I think there's always going to be people who are extremists.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I mean, just an example of a liberal stance that I'm not sure I agree with is just like anarchy. Like I don't believe in
Of course.
total self-government. Like I like roads and stoplights. Like like there's some things that are
Yeah.
great about the government like that. Or just also I mean, so for anarchy to be successful, for people to govern themselves, you need to not have any bigotry. And you need to have a completely cooperative community culture. And that's not what's here. And it's like that's a mindset, it's a culture. So that's difficult. You can, if you don't have government, you can't create policies that enforce that or encourage the development of that culture either. You would have to deal with what's already there. So that's kind of why I don't agree with it, not just because of like public projects and works like roads and things like that are obviously beneficial, but it's also like, well, how can we make sure that everybody is provided for? How can we make sure that people have a good education? How can we, like there's all these questions where it's like, maybe you can have small government. I'm not against limitations on government power over people. I certainly think there's a lot of things, that I disagree with as far as how our government is structured. But I don't think no government is the answer. And a lot of people who are anarchists don't truly believe in total non-government, and they just believe in a different form of government.
Hmm.
But I do know some people as well who really honestly believe that we could exist with zero government. And it's like maybe your community can be successful that way, but it's not a good solution for everyone.